Welcome to Your Schools on Community 7 Television. I'm Shoots Veis and I'm your host. Each month we look at a different aspect of what's going on with Billings Public Schools. And we're still having the pandemic out there. And so you've gotten a little bit used to us to having some of our conversations here on the Zoom call. And we're going to do that again this month. This month we're talking with Becky Carlson. And it's actually kind of appropriate for us to be doing this particular show as a Zoom call because Becky is working as the remote educational instructor or something along those lines. Becky, tell us what your title is and what it is you do on a regular basis.
Yeah, I'm Becky Carlson. I am the remote learning administrator for Billings Public Schools, and just overseeing the platform for this year as we are still navigating this pandemic. And yep, just making sure, aligning teachers to classes, getting kids enrolled even still onto the remote side, and working as an administrator would, doing just different duties to make sure it's operating.
All right, good deal. Well, I will have lots of questions about remote learning because it's a big topic. But before we dive into that, let's talk a little bit about you and your background. When did you kind of start working in education and how did you get into it?
Yeah, so I have my undergrad in elementary education certification, K-8. I graduated from Montana State University, Bozeman in 2007 and came to Billings that spring. Started in the fall of 2007 working at Blue Creek Elementary School. And I taught there for 10 years, did kind of a variance of grade levels from third grade up to sixth grade. I spent most of my time teaching sixth grade and did 1 year down in fourth grade. So, and then from there, I was a curriculum director for a local consortium called Alliance for Curriculum Enhancement, working with smaller schools around the Yellowstone County and as far as over to Belgrade. And then I was hired on by the district, received my master's degree through Rocky, and became an associate principal for 2 years at Medicine Middle School. And now I'm here.
All right, good deal. Let's talk a little bit about your current position. This is probably not a position that was available within Billings Public Schools, even probably a number of months ago. So tell us about the position, tell us how it was created, and tell us, again, kind of give us maybe a little more detailed layout of what it is your role is as in the job that you're in now.
Yeah. So the job came to fruition at the end of July when the district was able to afford it, essentially, when we were able to receive funding from the federally to be able to have staffing available, materials available for the students and the staff. And Brenda Koch gave me a call, said, we're looking at doing some movement for this position and your name is who came to mind. And so, as a district employee, I work for the district and told her that if that's where she needed me, I would, do my best and work to my best ability to make sure that we serve the students of School District 2 who are choosing to do the remote side. And so just a little bit about kind of what I do is I oversee 2,500 kids. And I'm trying to think, sorry. There's a lot of things. My day never goes as planned. So trying to facilitate a lot of conversations with parents, trying to navigate through the technology aspects, how to log into Zooms, where to find their classes, where to find the Zoom links. I do a lot of troubleshooting that way, trying to provide them with the appropriate resources if they are in fact having troubles with internet. I also navigate with staff student issues if there's any kind of behavior problems or if they're not seeing a student engaging in the learning. Attendance has been a huge push right now, especially on the remote side, and making sure those kids we're finding those kids or reaching out to them to see how we can help them as best as we possibly can. Trying to provide academic decisions based on what we can provide on the remote side. That's another piece to this whole puzzle. I'm trying to think. I do a lot of phone calls and a lot of emailing too. Sure. That's pretty nonstop. So that's kind of in a nutshell what it.
Sure. Did you have kind of any expectations coming into this about what the position would be? And now that you've been into it for several months now, what have you learned that the position really is?
Yeah. So, ideally it was, let's set a framework. What framework could we provide for our students in the school district to have them be as successful as they possibly could? And we used the work of John Hattie, actually had a very recent book based on, if you will, the crisis teaching that took place last spring on having to go remote with the pandemic being in place. And so it uses research on how impactful learning can be on the remote side and how it can still be successful. And it's all pretty new, so it was nice to have updated information to provide to our staff. And so initially it was, let's develop a framework. Let's look at other models that have been around for a while, and see how we can blend those to best meet the needs here in Billings. And so that was the initial expectation, and things evolve and change. And we've been learning from practices we've put in place and what we can do to improve on those practices as we've started navigating these last 2 months.
Sure. Talk to us about how, the role of your position in contacts with other administrators at Billings Public Schools.
Mm-hmm.
A, you are administrator, but B, you're kind of a very different administrator. So how do you kind of see yourself in that context?
Yeah, I think it's I have become a liaison among all of the schools, if that makes sense, because I'm working with every single school in the district, because every single school has a minimum of one student in the remote side. So a lot of times I reach out to schools if there's particular issues with students that I'm unaware of or unsure on how to tackle, and maybe how they've handled certain situations. Maybe it's a student who we see isn't excelling well. And so we work with that school to see what we can do to help make that student be successful. So it's almost been, I have kind of become this liaison, like I said, if you will, with each school, and I've developed a lot of relationships in the short time being of administrators that I didn't know. And I've learned values, of each school and what they really instill. And so that's been a neat experience to have.
Sure. Going back, I guess, to last spring when school had to kind of be shut down or not shut down, but moved remotely for everybody. Was that a helpful experience for you in what you're dealing with, today? Were there lessons that you kind of learned then, and at least some of that could be applied to starting the whole school year, knowing that those students were going to be online?
I think you kind of nailed something that was interesting. If I learned going from last spring to this spring, it's a lot easier to have school go remote when it's already been established.
Yeah.
It's been very difficult in the fall trying to establish a new school and having, roughly 3 to 5 weeks to have it go, when typically you have a school structure takes a year, when you're building a brand new school even. And so that was a learning curve right there in itself. But we definitely learned a lot of things, making sure that the appropriate technologies were put in place. Last spring, when we went into the remote setting, there were students who didn't have internet access. And I know, Bresnan was doing their outreach to try to help provide services. So we were able to have internet hotspots for families who do not have internet this fall. That was a good learning experience for us. Looking at how to find the kid, I keep bringing up the attendance piece, but making sure kids are engaging in the learning. The framework that we had last spring in the middle school, especially when they were transitioning between different classes, we learned some things there, and how we could maybe block the time a little more on the remote side, so there's not short 55-minute windows and things like that. And so we kind of took that framework and made it K-12 essentially, where there's more chunked time, longer time periods for different subjects. And so that's been helpful. But then also providing that Wednesday, that was something else we learned, where there can be that outreach to the kids if they needed individual needs met. Because in a typical classroom on a day-to-day basis, you have that opportunity to do a one-on-one session with a kid, and where we don't really have that on the remote side. And so providing Wednesdays a weekly clinic for kids to reach out to their teachers for any extra support or help, or the teacher reaching out to the students, that's been a benefit too.
Sure. Was there anything you were able to do? You know, I know that's always such a big transition, like say from an eighth grader as a freshman, right? And they've set up days where it's just the freshmen who show up to high school, and you know that's in a physical building at a physical location.
Mhm.
Were you guys able to do something along those lines as well, an orientation for those students who are making big transitions from one school to the next, and say, I know you're not physically here, but this is still a big transition for you.
Yeah, so we did like a virtual open house the Friday before school started on the remote side. So if students were able to access that, that was about the best opportunity for them to be able to understand kind of how the remote side was going to look. Those high school teachers and middle school teachers, especially with those transitions, sat and kind of walked, you know, through what a typical week would look like with the students, how they would get into their Google Classroom accounts, utilizing Power School. You know, we talked about a lot of those pieces that would help them be successful in navigating the remote side.
Okay. So what was the expectation going into the year over how many students would be choosing to learn online coming into the fall? And then what actually panned out? What did you guys see when the doors actually opened?
Yeah, so when they started exploring the remote option in early July, just putting out a survey, if you had this is an option, what would your choice be? Would it be in building or remote? And when they received those survey results back, they were anticipating about 5,000 students. And right now, exactly today, we have 2,516, which is about where we've been hovering since the start of school, as far
Okay.
as numbers go.
And can you break that down a little bit for us? How many of those are high school students? How many of those are middle school students? How many of those are elementary students?
Yeah, yep. So for pre-K through five, because we do house pre-K students in out of Rimrock, and it's more, you know, for the special education setting. But we have currently 957 kids K5, which is about 38% of the students on the remote side. In middle school, grades 6 through 8, we have 638 kids, which is about 27%. And then in grades 9 through 12, we have 876 students, which is 35%.
Okay. All right. And then the next step, I'm sure during that process, as you're trying to figure out how many students I'm going to have, you also need to have teachers for those
Mm-hmm.
students. So
Mm-hmm.
how did you go about, given what you're anticipating and what you turned out, how do you match the teachers where you need them? And were there any unique situations, like, i.e., I'm just throwing this out there, so if I'm crazy, I'm crazy. You know, we thought there'd be about 100 first graders, but it turns out there's 200, and we thought there'd be about 100 second graders, and it turns out there's only 30. In any situations like that, and how did you match teachers with where they were needed?
Yeah, so it initially started, we accommodated those staff members who had medical conditions to put them onto the remote side. And so we started with that staff and placed them accordingly based on what they had previously taught, based whether it be grade level or content. And then from there, there was a survey that had gone out about teachers who may have been interested in wanting to pursue the remote side. So we pulled those staff members. Then with that created a huge shift in all of the buildings because we had to reduce teachers in the buildings in order to support the remote. And we are still, in fact, hiring. I think we got maybe our last one in elementary. We had taken our curriculum coaches and put those into the elementary setting. Our fifth grade numbers are still really high. And so we just received a new a long-term sub who will be taking that role on in November so we can reduce the class sizes there. We are still seeing extremely high numbers in our middle school and high school. We're trying to figure out a plan of action and how we can help support those teachers as best as we can.
Sure.
So, yep.
All right. You've touched on probably a lot of this, but I'll ask this question anyway, so you can answer it in a different way. But what does a typical day look like in your position, in your role? What are you doing on a typical day?
Yeah. So I answer a lot of phone calls. I am answering a lot of emails, trying to troubleshoot problems. You know, I think I've put out a lot of fires, you know, whether it be, as I said, technology issues. I've done a lot of Zoom meetings with students. I found that to be the best way, and it takes time, unfortunately. And so when you're talking about 2,500 kids, it takes 30 minutes a phone call when you're troubleshooting these issues, or a Zoom call. And I have found, especially in the middle school and high school, Zooming with the kids and helping them navigate their classrooms and their power school, that typically has helped them understand how the week looks for them. That's been a big issue. Trying to, apply protocols or policies that aren't typical, that are unique in the remote side. You have these typical procedures in a building. Well, they look a little different on the remote side. So how do we implement those or put those in place? So, a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails, meetings, and trying to establish procedures that will best fit the needs of our staff and our students and our families.
All right. What has been the most challenging aspect of kind of getting this online learning up and running?
Yeah, I would say that I have this one written out because it was really difficult. I was like, okay, what's been the most challenging piece? When there's a problem, that kid not being right there, or that staff member, you having to send out an email or make a phone call and say, hey, do you have a quick minute to chat? And that part, I think, has been the most challenging, especially with teachers and just people who work with people. We're people, and so not really having that connection physically, it's virtually. And I think that piece, trying to build that relationship, has been very much a challenge.
Sure. What do you think has probably gone better than you expected during the course of getting this off and running?
Yeah, I think doing it in 3 weeks, 3 to 5 weeks, like, I feel really happy about that. And it hasn't been perfect by no means, but what platform is ever perfect? And I think just knowing that there was a challenge out there and we needed to fulfill that challenge. And I think also the other piece that's been really rewarding or less than expected is having that opportunity to work with the community, working with kids from Ben Steele to Medicine Crow, or from Skyview to West. It's been such a neat way to, I guess, just work with the families and have all capacities of our community and trying to support them.
Sure. Talk to us about the type of technologies you're using. What are the teachers using? What are the students using? And are those the same across, K-5, middle school, and high school?
Yeah. So we have our kids in K2 are using iPads, the majority of them. Some of them were in unique situations where we ran out of iPads. Our tech department has been good about trying to find iPads from other schools to help support those students. And then grades 3 through 12 have been using Chromebooks. The platforms that they've been using for the students is they use Seesaw for grades K3, and then grades 4 through 12 are using Google Classroom. And the teachers have laptops that have been made available. We've also provided them with dual platform or dual screens, so they can operate their class on one. And then we have management systems such as Go Guardian, where they're able to see what the kids are on and help communicate. That's just another way to communicate with the kids. They can either chat with them or they can call them directly. But that is, in order to be able to do that, it has to be through a district issued device, which we provided for every single student. The other thing, we provided headsets for the teachers, and also document cameras for them to be able to have in their workspace.
All right. Talk to us a little bit about maybe some of those specialty classes. Now I'm talking probably maybe at the middle school, at the high school level. And I know this stuff happens at the elementary school level too, but probably not to the same extent. What do you do with the specialty classes, or maybe not even specialty, but stuff like art, stuff like PE, stuff like music class? What are you guys doing to facilitate those classes in an online setting?
Yeah, so we still provide health lessons. The teachers in the middle school have created activity logs, and in the high school for the students that they have to complete each week. In the art classes, we have provided kits for the students. They aren't completed yet because, again, a lot of this stuff has taken time to be able to get. Our teacher has, worked with the students in the best of their capacity, whatever materials they have at their house, to design or create whatever art piece they wanted them to, but have been developing kits. Our Empower teacher in the middle school, she created a sewing kit that the students will be picking up soon. In the elementary with PE, she's been doing live activities 1 week with particular grade levels, and then they're practicing those fine motor skills or gross motor skills. And then the next week it's more asynchronous. So they're doing some form of activity and having to demonstrate it to present to her, or they're doing some kind of project. Music, she has large groups there. They're teaching band, doing orchestra, and doing choir. And so, they have, it's more individualized, I guess you would say, where they're actually practicing and turning in how they're practicing. And then they do some of the whole group instruction as well. So, they've been unique in trying to find a way to best fit the needs of the kids, but then also trying to present their content as best as they can too.
Sure. Another area that I would think would be, at least unique, if not a bit of a struggle, would be in the special education realm. How are you able to do that? Maybe with students who are really going to struggle with the technology. So, talk to us about some of the things that you guys are being able to do on the special education side of things.
Yeah. So to start the school year, each special education teacher had to meet with their caseload of students and their families and go through what a remote implementation plan would look like for their student. And so that might have meant adjusting their accommodations to fit accordingly on the remote side, or adjusting the minutes to their IEP based on what, again, they can provide. I think a lot of the underwriters would say, the case managers would say that they have been very much almost facilitators or coaches and mentors. But I'd say that's for all teachers too that are really on this remote side. But especially with our special education students, trying to help them navigate logging into a class, attending the class, meeting the needs of whatever it is that their IEP might state. So, and then using the family also to help bridge that gap.
Sure, absolutely. Are you finding that some of the students that are coming in, are they excelling in this setting? Talk to us about the breakdown of how many students that maybe you're seeing, hey, this is great, this is the greatest thing ever. Some that they're doing just fine, but yeah, and then some that maybe are just not doing well in this type of setting.
Yeah, I would definitely say the students who are motivated learners and are independent learners have had the most success at it, but also the students who maybe a public place or a social forum isn't what they prefer, and I think of those students often that I've taught over the years that just being in a social setting wasn't what worked best for them. And we're seeing those students excel on the remote side. But like I said, it's the motivated learners and the independent learners that we're seeing the most success with.
Sure. What is it, if there was one thing you wish parents could understand about online learning, what would that be?
That was a hard question when I read that one earlier. I think that something we have to remember is this is all new to everybody. And right now in the world, everything is extremely overwhelming. And teachers are doing what they can to help the students. Parents are doing what they can to help the students. This takes a team effort. And so for us to be able to communicate proactively for what's the best interest of the child at hand is what's going to make this work best. And I look at this, and I said this last spring too, when a teacher asked me, she's like, what do you think about this? I said, this is the most engaged a parent has ever been able to be in a student's learning for students who attend school. And what an opportunity for us to be able to maximize that, I kind of almost think of it as a third and a third and a third, if you will. A third of it's the teacher working with the families and the student, a third of the student producing work and showing that they're learning and showing up every day, and a third of it's on the parents to make sure that their number one priority is helping their students be successful in the learning process. So just that it's a team effort, and to communicate and work towards what's in the best interest of the child.
All right. What are some of the goals you have, for online learning over the course of the next year? I'm assuming this is, I believe you guys are committed to having online school all the way through next spring. And so what are some of the goals you hope to have accomplished by the time you get through there to next spring?
Yeah, I think continuing to provide academic opportunities for our students and seeing that evolve and change and knowing that that's okay. I think it's kind of a goal, but it's also like an evolution, if you will, too. But
Yeah,
that's just something that I really want for the kids and for our staff to be able to every child learn. And improving our engagement. And again, I know I keep bringing up the attendance piece, but there are some concerning factors of students not attending those Zoom sessions and trying to do what we can to help them. Making sure that because that's a huge part of the learning process, because that's when they're getting most of their instruction.
sure.
We do have teachers who provide, as we call it, asynchronous materials, but that meaning students learning on their own. But there is a huge impact for that direct instruction that's provided by the teacher for a student to learn.
All right. Talk to us a little bit about where do you see this going? Where do you see Billings Public Schools taking this into the future? Let's just wave a magic wand and say that, yeah, you get through next spring, but there is no pandemic reason for online learning next fall. Where do you see what you guys are doing now fitting in with public schools in the future?
Yeah, I see it definitely having the potential. The funding is what it comes down to, and being able to afford it ultimately. I think that we've definitely learned a lot with the whole process, and there would definitely be things that we would change for it to continue. But we would definitely, like I said, we'd really have to take into consideration the funding piece, just because it's a whole new school.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Are there at least pieces and parts of what you're doing now that you see for sure will be used going forward? I know even if we go back to classrooms and this isn't a big deal, I know that these pieces, these technologies are going to be used going forward.
Absolutely. I think every school did a really good job preparing or worked on preparing their teachers in building in the event we ever had to go remote entirely as a district. So they've provided the same structures as far as utilizing Seesaw as a platform or Google Classroom as a platform. I don't ever see those going away in the future. And the kids are able to access instructional materials that way too, if they're absent. Even if it's for an extended period of time, whether they're going on vacation, they're sick, whatever it might be. So I definitely see those platforms sticking around in the future.
All right. Well, Becky, thank you so much for joining us today and talking to us about remote learning. It's certainly a very interesting topic, and I know it's something new. So kudos to you and the staff that works with you for putting this together and getting it out there for Billings Public Schools and meeting the moment that we're in now. And I know it's been a lot of hard work. So thank you for all that you do.
Thank you.